ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
Let me welcome to the show because I love Ramon's like his love, his jealousy over people touching his books. I love books. I think more of us need to read. I have a story about how reading for pleasure has plummeted. We've been talking about this consistently here. But this is how we tell our stories for the 100 years from now generation. We got to put it into something that they can pass along. I was telling this guest that I was, from New Jersey, so I know this story well. And then I was a journalist at the New York Daily News, not when this happened, but later. But I remember this story so profoundly because it was the first time that I recognized the possibility that police may not be here to help us. I have the privilege of being raised in a neighborhood where everybody was Black, including the police and the police chief, the mayor, and the police chief lived on my street. So I never feared the police. But when I saw this story, I said, how could they kill a woman, a grandmother who was infirmed, actually? She was not even, said that she lunged at them, and that warrant killing her? It broke my heart. And it made me understand that something else is going on here. So let me welcome to the show. She is an author, of course. She wrote a book called Tell Her Story. This is important. Eleanor Bumpers and the police killing that galvanized New York City. Let me welcome LaShawn Harris to the Karen Hunter Show. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you for coming in. Yeah. October 29th, 1984.
Yes.
66-year-old grandmother, disabled, was murdered in her home. We now are used to Tatiana Jefferson and Breonna Taylor. We used to, Botham Jean, we're used to people invading people's homes. This is one of the first stories that made national headlines. So how did you become familiar with it?
I became familiar. Thank you for having me on the show. But I became familiar with the Eleanor Bumpers story because I lived across the street from Eleanor Bumpers, and actually, my parents, who had dogs, and Eleanor Bumpers' daughter, Mary Bumpers, who also had dogs, they used to play with one another. I also became familiar with the story because on October 29th, this is a few days before Halloween, and all of the kids in the neighborhood were expected to go out and trick or treat, but we couldn't trick or treat that particular year because all of the reporters, the activists were kind of swarming the neighborhood trying to see what happened, trying to get the story and trying to interview folks. And I really forgot about Eleanor Bumpers, but I constantly saw that, famous 1980 photo in the New York Daily News, the one where she's kind of looking really sad. It's actually the cover of my book. And I wanted to know who this person was. I wanted to know what impact did her death have on not just the New York City community, but my community in the Bronx. So I felt really compelled to tell a story that was victim-centered and one that really looked at her interior life prior to her getting shot by the police. I think that's really important when we think about police shooting victims, to humanize them. And so many political activists and family activists are in that tradition or have to do the really painful work of, grieving for their loved ones on TV, but also telling their personal stories. And I wanted to do that for Eleanor Bumpers, but I lived across the street from her. I was 10 years old when that incident happened on October 29th, 1984.
Mm. So Dr. Black talks about this a lot. We were just talking about ancestors and the importance of telling stories. I know in the space that we have called Nubia, that's going to be a really big thing. And I've arrived at this thing where everybody has a story. Like, we have been conditioned that only certain people get to tell their story, right, or things have to be told a certain kind of way in order to be valid. So I thank you again for this, because Eleanor Bumper's story is always told through the lens of that that shotgun,
That's
that
right.
shotgun blast to her chest.
That's right.
But who was she?
Well, Eleanor Bumpers was a child of Jim Crow segregation. She was from North Carolina. She was born on August 22nd, 1918. So her birthday was a couple days ago. And she was, one of those Black women that came to New York City in the 1940s via the, Great Migration, like a lot of Black women. And she was someone who loved to dance. She loved to cook. She loved her children. She loved to take her children on, different types of outings. And she loved life. What we don't really know about her is this kind of woman who was really surrounded by a community. I think when you think about her case and how the New York Times, as well as the New York Daily News, kind of told the story, it made it almost seem as if Eleanor Bumpers was abandoned and alone, but she was surrounded by a community of people, and we see that community of people coming out for her when she's murdered by the police. But she was someone who loved her kids, and she also was someone who had, mental health challenges as well as physical challenges.
And why, according to the police, right? And we know this, of course, is a slippery slope, but why are they saying they shot her?
Well, this was during a housing eviction, and the housing eviction had been planned for Eleanor Bumpers in July of 1984. The eviction doesn't happen until October 29th. So even prior, and I'll get to your question in 2 seconds, Dr. Black, but prior to the eviction, Housing Authority knew that Eleanor Bumpers had mental health challenges. So really, the housing authority as well as the city social workers did not get her the proper services she needed to even prevent the eviction. So prior to those six officers going into the apartment, the city had already abandoned her. They had already abandoned her and put her in the crosshairs of the police. By the time that the police go in, and there's two different NYPD units. It's first the Housing Authority Police, and then there's the Emergency Service Police, two different authorities. There's a whole team there waiting, attempting to put her out. And allegedly, right, this is someone, again, who is living with mental health issues, who may suffer, who suffered from hallucinations. And when they went into the apartment, she allegedly held a knife in her hand, in her right hand, and allegedly she lunged at them. They shot her in the right hand, blowing off three fingers. And allegedly, according to the police and according to the city report that followed up after, um, she was still flailing with the knife, and off the officer Stephen Sullivan ended up shooting her in the chest, which would be the fatal wound. She didn't die immediately, but I want to make it clear that prior to the police going in, the city had already abandoned her by not giving her the proper services. The city could have easily avoided the eviction if they had paid her back rent, because she was late. So that was the reason for the eviction. The city had a history of paying people's rent, but this time, she essentially fell through the cracks.
Mm. Which also probably lends us to know that police, their job should not probably be this. There should be another agency that deals with evictions or, mental health issues, not police with guns.
Yeah. And the emergency service unit, the specialized, heavy trained, heavy armed police, this is the unit since the 1970s that had the job of dealing with persons with mental health issues. So this is the unit that was supposed to go in, and they actually end up killing somebody
With a shotgun, which
with a
is not, is that
shotgun.
normal? Is that normal? LaShawn Harris is here, historian. We're here with Dr. Daniel Black, historian, educator, etc. Is that normal? A shotgun?
It's normal for this unit.
A
When
shotgun.
it's normal for this, with if you look at the 1980s emergency service units, their training, and some of this is online too. It's normal for them to go in with lots of weaponry. Many of the housing people who lived in Sedgwick houses, this is where Eleanor Bumpers killed, also questioned why was it needed for the heavy police presence, as well as the police that carry such, massive weaponry. So it was normal for this particular unit, yes.
Okay. 866-801-8255. She had children.
Eleanor Bumpers had 7 children, 5
Mm.
daughters, and 2 sons. And Mary Bumpers, who is still alive, she becomes the activist for the family. She becomes the family spokesperson who is left to grieve her mother publicly, but also do that kind of hard work of, saying her name, telling that story, and fighting for legal justice for her mother.
How are they today?
Well, in my book, I only talk to Mary Bumpers, and I say this in the introduction, and just out of great respect. The other siblings or the other family members were not interviewed for the book. They were not interested in talking with me about their feelings, about what happened to them, and I respected that privacy.
Mm.
But I had
Mm.
access to Mary Bumpers, and she's doing well. I am so grateful for her for opening up an old wound, for sharing her story with me, for sharing her mother's story with me, and for really tracing those steps back to a really painful chapter in her life.
What do you want the folk who read this book to walk away with, LaShawn?
I want folks to know that all victims, particularly those of police violence, we should censor their stories prior to the moments of death and destruction. The way that it's fine, and I know the importance of saying the name, right, articulating one's name, but we have to keep those stories and those histories going about their lives prior to those violent encounters. So the things that I'm talking about is those really complex, beautiful lives and layers, their joys, their ambitions, their weaknesses. I love the work that, Gwen Carr does for her son, Eric Gardner. I love what Emerald Card, the daughter of Eric Gardner, does in her book. I love the work of Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, the son of Trayvon Martin. I love what Ryan Coogler does for Oscar Grant. All of them tell these kind of really complex and rich stories. I love the work that's done by Robert Smith, right? Telling about George Floyd. So I think it's important to really center victim stories, because if we don't, then we end up with falsehoods about people. We end up with things that, that's again center on death and destruction. And we end up with kind of one-dimensional stories about people who really live complicated and complex lives. So I think that if we start to tell these stories, we can have a more meaningful engagement about the life and also how people died.
I want to ask one
Amen.
last thing, if I could, and that is, with 7 children, was there a husband?
No, Eleanor Bumpers was a single mom. She comes to New York City in the 1940s with a companion, who was probably, still married, and she had, male companions, but she was a single mom. She was on her own. And that's what makes this
The reason
story
why I asked
also.
that, and I asked that not for any moral reason. I asked that
Sure.
because there were and are ways that I argue that America reprimands Black women, right? Who seem
Yes.
to be rearing these children, right, on their own, right? And America is really saying that, get you a man and your life will be better.
Right. 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 Right.
Get you a man and things and things won't be so difficult for you. Which means, right, follow what I'm saying, which means there are ways in which the public and the police particularly understand single Black women as particularly recalcitrant.
Mm.
Yes, I agree. I mean, this is during the late 70s. Eleanor Bumpers that incident happens in 84. So we know how politicians, Reagan in particular, we know what the Moynihan report said about,
Right?
Black women, particularly
Exactly.
single Black women, right?
Exactly.
So Black women, in general, and Black single women with children are demonized, as welfare cheats, as criminals, and as women who can't get men or can't keep a man, right? That there are these super strong beings that men, their men have taken off. So yes, that puts them in a very vulnerable predicament oftentimes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that perspective, Dr. Daniel Black. And I want to thank you, LaShawn Harris, for Tell Her Story. Tell Her Story, Tell Her Story, Eleanor Bumpers and the police killing that galvanized New York City. It's probably out today. I mean, it's out tomorrow, they say. But you could
Yes.
probably, if you order it today, you get your book and they're sending it out. Y'all can follow her at Bronx Historian 08 on the IG, Bronx Historian 08, or Madam Claire. Madam Claire, what's the '08? Madam Claire '08 on Blue Sky. What's the '08 about, LaShawn
Madam
Harris?
Madam Claire is for Stephanie Sinclair, which my first book is on, from the Harlem Numbers
Ah,
Runner of the
oh,
20s
I
and
love that.
30s. And the '08 is for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Oh, okay. Oh, Dr. Black knew that. I didn't. I'm unaffiliated, as they would say, but I respect it all, the Divine Nine, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for coming through today.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.